to Liquid Lunch. It's me, Hugh, and Daniel Case is on the case. Right, Daniel?
Yep.
All right, let's get down to business. We got Dee Nicholson. I said Dee Nicholson.
Who?
Dee Nicholson. Yeah, Dee Nicholson. Right? You're here, aren't you? You came here today, didn't you? You're right here, right now.
Yeah, actually I am. I haven't translocated or anything like that.
Or disappeared or reappeared?
No, this is my honest self, not my astral self.
Well, okay, so we're going to talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and other stuff, right?
Yeah, that's all connected.
All right, so where do we begin, Dee? I know you're keeping everybody informed about these issues all the time. We get emails from you every day.
Yeah, I've been trying. Okay, you know I've been trying for more than a decade.
And you're doing a lot of good research. I learn a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I got to kind of lead you into this, how this happened. You know, back years ago when you and I first met.
Where did we first meet? I don't even remember now. Where was
here, a long time ago. Anyways.
We'll do that.
Shush. Anyways, the bottom line is, when I started out with all this stuff, I was looking at the Codex Alimentarius Committee of the World Health Organization / World Trade Organization. And the big fear in the health freedom groups was that Codex Alimentarius, which means in Latin food code or food regulations, were going to impede our ability to access natural health products, natural health supplements, etc. And I looked into the mechanisms of how that worked. But when I saw the mechanisms of how that worked, I realized that it was a trade agreement. And then I realized that when a country signs onto a trade agreement, essentially you're dealing with, and this information is on the World Trade Organization website, so if you look under a section called sovereignty, you will see exactly this. It says that an international trade group is an international version of a contract, and it is enforceable. And what that contract means, because it's international law, is that it supersedes any ability that your government has to make legislation that is contrary to what is decided in this group. In other words, we are giving up our sovereignty. And that means our ability to make legislation in those specific areas.
So basically, if they were to make anything against that, there would be major legislations and...
Yeah, how would they enforce
it?
Well,
let me explain that. In the case of Codex, which is an easy one to understand, for example, that committee can decide how much vitamin D you can take in a day. Okay? Your allowable daily allowance, which then affects the packaging and the supply of those supplements, because manufacturers can no longer sell a larger dose. Well, Codex was essentially removing all our proper dosages, excuse me, and forcing people.
And what?
Forcing people to take less dose.
Yeah.
Pardon me while I hack a blunt.
It's okay. It's probably, well, like, for example, like Linus Pauling, I think he said, like, super doses of vitamin C could get colds and stuff like that, and people were self-dosing with vitamin C.
I would be in bed today if it were not for vitamin D3.
Yeah.
What you're hearing now is called what's left after a cold.
Right.
At any rate, what's important here is that these international regulations supersede everything that we do. Then I realized that all trade agreements, all of them, have the same rules in them. Number one, total secrecy. On the grounds that multinationals are divulging corporate secrets. So we, the people, can't have access to that. And I'm going, horse crap. That's crap. That's not the truth. These guys do not reveal their patented information in groups. They don't. So it's an excuse. Well, there goes your secrecy, and this is why nobody has told any of the content of any of these agreements, right, until after the deal is done. Well, I start looking at the other agreements. Most notable was in 2010 when we had that infamous G20 meeting here, and the infamous kettling of the people at Spadina and Queen, and all of that was going on. At the end of that debacle, Harper comes on TV and he's talking about having just signed the Basel III banking agreement. This after a year and a half or 2 years of bragging about our banking regulations having saved Canada from the impact of the recession, global recession. Well, and I quote, and it's still on YouTube, you can view it yourself. He says regarding the Basel III banking agreement, well, I know some people don't like it, and it is a loss of sovereignty, but it's a simple fact of life. I go, wait a minute.
Who said that? Harper?
Harper said that.
What exactly? Can you explain a little what that is?
It means that all these vaunted regulations that we had for our banks are now superseded by the Basel III agreement, and our government can no longer make the law for the Bank of Canada or any other banks in this country. In other words, we're all the same now.
So our regulations that kind of saved us from the global banking debacle,
Tossed out completely.
now there's one set of rules.
Yeah,
Instead
for
of every
everybody.
country having their own sets of rules, there's one set of rules,
For everybody.
the
Exactly.
Basel III
Yeah.
rules.
So now we have, on top of that, we have NAFTA. Everybody knows what NAFTA did to us. We lost 60, 70,000 family farms. We've lost something like 6,000 high-paying professional jobs. We've lost a lot of industry that's moved elsewhere. You remember the Inglis plant moved down to Mexico and all
That's
that
just
stuff.
one example.
That's
There's
just
the entire cities have been decimated.
Exactly. Detroit is one of them.
Well, Detroit, yeah, but I mean in Canada.
Yeah, but it's all over. I mean, it's the same thing for everybody. If you sign this thing, you're going to get hit by this thing. And there's no question about it. So now we've got about a dozen of these agreements are already signed. And what people don't realize is that the same rules of secrecy and the same rules of taking over our sovereignty apply in every single case. And if you do your research, you go back to GATT, the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, you'll find the same rules are there too.
Right.
So we're not talking about something that is a recent development here. We're talking about a plot. What does that plot do? Well, firstly,
screws us over.
Well, that's the basics of it. Yeah, you got that right. But the bottom line is the groups, the international groups, are now in charge of the legislation of all the signatories to each of those agreements. And what people are not realizing is anytime this group wants to get together and amend an agreement that they've already told us about, they can do that too. And nobody's talking about that. So we're looking at the TPP. Everybody's up in arms about the TPP. Magically, the light bulbs have gone on, and they're realizing that the TPP can screw the internet, it can screw trade, it can screw this, it can screw that. And small businesses, forget it. If you're not a big box multinational, you're not going to be doing business in Canada much longer. Well, it's the same for all of the other nations that are planning to sign and ratify is TPP. Well, that's not even, as far as I'm concerned, they could use the TPP as a lost leader and dump the whole thing tomorrow. But by virtue of all the other trade agreements we're in, they still got us by the short hairs. So they might throw Doggy a bone and say, oh, well, so many people are against it, we've decided not to do it.
Not to do TPP, for example.
And then what happens? All the activists go, hey, we won one, and they go back to sleep.
Meanwhile, TPP 2 comes along.
Yeah. Or it's enforced vicariously through other agreements.
Right. Now, Dee, we've had a lot of conversations about this before. One of the things that you've said, and I want you to sort of articulate it here now, is that, because you made the case that there's no need to have a trade agreement.
No,
right?
There never was.
And do you want to explain that? Because I think it's a good point.
Well, here's the thing. Business has always been conducted on the basis of one entity here and another entity here, making an agreement, shaking hands, drawing up a contract between them so that both sides are moderately satisfied or perfectly satisfied or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's your deal. Right? We've always traded like that.
Yeah.
Always. Now all of a sudden we got to have an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're saying that what they're doing is they're facilitating trade. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing in terms of facilitating trade is eliminating the tariff mess. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't need trade agreements to eliminate tariff messes, now did they?
Why do you say that?
It's another agreement. You just agree, if we're going to trade these things or those things, we're going to agree to have these tariffs or no tariffs or whatever. They don't have to impede our sovereignty.
Right. Go ahead.
Do you know who's enforcing these agreements?
Each individual group, if you run into trouble with them, can come after you in the international court. But we, citizens, have no recourse. Only our government can sue the trade group. Sanctions are enforced by the World Trade Organization. They are the police. So there we have it. We are under one big fat thumb. And what people need to realize is by virtue of the numbers of these agreements, that's the infrastructure of your new world, one world government. Mm-hmm. Because everything is removed from your domestic government
yeah.
and placed in the hands of people who aren't elected, who we don't know the names of, and we got one seat at the table. Mm-hmm. One vote, one seat. Mm-hmm. How much weight do we carry? One vote, one seat.
Plus, you and I, as individual Canadians, have zero impact
input,
on how Canada's voting at that table.
Zero
right?
input, zero oversight, zero say.
Yeah.
So our sovereignty, our ability to self-govern, our literal democracy. Mm-hmm. Goodbye.
And there's another point that because the zeitgeist for the past, 40 years or so has been, at least the talk in the media coming out of think tanks has been, we have to get rid of tariffs. Tariffs are bad, right? But I think if you really looked at history, you can make the argument that tariffs, when used judiciously by countries, are very effective at helping.
That's why we used them in the first place.
At helping countries grow their infrastructure,
exactly.
Create jobs, create wealth.
Exactly.
Right? And so, by lowering tariffs around the world, who does that benefit? It only benefits the big multinational companies. That's really all who it benefits. And not only that, just a point I want to make, right? Because we see it every day when we walk down the street, the effect that these trade agreements have had on the increasing numbers of Canadians who can't find jobs or can't find decent paying jobs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just
wait till you hear the rest of it.
Okay. Instead of to the people.
One thing people don't realize, okay, all this hoo-ha about the post office, okay, and no more home delivery of mail.
Yeah.
They want to make the super mailboxes on every corner
Yeah.
and make people with strollers and crutches and wheelchairs go all the way in a snow blizzard to check their mail. And of course people are going, we can't have that, we can't have that.
Yeah.
So what do in a case where the post office or some other crown corporation
Yeah.
shows itself to be A, badly managed, B, on the verge of collapse, and C, without any kind of visible resolution? They privatize. Okay, one of the things under these trade agreements is all our crown corporations, say goodbye to them. Okay, this is not about the people making a profit off anything. This is about corporations making profit.
Exploiting, a pure exploitation
Now,
scenario.
speaking of exploitation, let's take another look at one of the terms and conditions that is also written into every trade agreement. These, again, you can research on the World Trade Organization website. That is WTO.org. Just remember WTO and org at the back. Okay, now what this is called the Tariffs rules. Tariffs rules are trade-related intellectual properties, i.e. patents. Patented and proprietary goods and services. Now, what that means is that, and this is what the rule says, that if you have a patented product or service that you're bringing into the country under a trade agreement, you are guaranteed by TRIPS rules that there's going to be a level playing field for you to compete in our market. Now, if there is no level playing field, and this is where they really get us, it is usually because some existing piece of legislation or some existing arrangement is in violation of what the trade agreement says. Level playing field, you say. Well, after we signed the first Canada-U.S. trade agreement back in 87-88, where Shelley Ann Clark, you'll remember Shelley, you've interviewed her. Might be an idea to get her back on sometime in the near future to explain more. But the bottom line is that under that one agreement, UPS, United Parcel Service, which is a U.S.-based company, sued Canada for $252 million. It's $250 million. Okay? For what? Because Canada, the government, through Canada Post, which is a crown corporation owned by the people, owns a piece of Purolator. And Purolator is a competitor. Therefore, UPS argued in trade court that Canada was giving an unfair advantage to Purolator.
Bullshit.
Yeah, well, that's what I say too.
Bullshit.
But they won. And guess who paid the $250 million?
Each and every one of us.
Each and every one of us, because it's not a corporation that pays it, it's the taxpayer. Okay, so that was our first experience with trade law, where it went sour on us. $252 million worth. Why? Because some years back, Canada Post invested in a courier service rather than running its own. Okay? So because of that, that was deemed an unfair playing field. Ergo, we pay. Now, there are, at this point, and at any point in time now, roughly 3,000 of these trade suits going on everywhere around the world. 3,000 of them. So every minute of every day, some country somewhere is being sued by some trade group somewhere for money that's coming out of the people's pockets.
In other words, corporations are picking the pockets of taxpayers all around the world.
Bingo. Okay? And in the meantime, as a double hit, taking our right to decide what kind of laws we want for our country and dictating all of that to us. Now, there's a real gem going on here that's also under the realm of international agreements, international contracts. And that one is the SPP.
What's that, Dee?
The Security and Prosperity Partnership.
But security and prosperity seem like such good ideas.
Yeah, that's how they, they have a dictionary full of fluff words that they pad all these things with so that they look good to us. Okay?
Till you read it.
Yeah, till you actually read it, but most people don't. And that's precisely what they count on. Okay? Now, the SPP guarantees that whatever the United States wants to do vis-a-vis national security, because we share a 5,000-mile long border, we're now signed to do exactly the same thing here. And under the SPP, their cops can operate here, and our cops can operate there.
Yeah, I've definitely heard about that one.
Yeah, well, they were doing that long
Ridiculous.
before the trade agreement anyway. They did it during the Vietnam War, particularly in Vancouver. They had FBI and other alphabet soup guys running around Vancouver police squad cars. Know that for a fact. Saw it with my own two eyes. At any rate, in conjunction with this, we have, do you remember the Patriot Act?
Yeah.
That's the U.S. Patriot Act.
After 9/11,
Yeah.
they it was their
Now-
first big police state bill, right?
Yeah, their first big police state bill right after George Bush said, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. Of course, there's no middle ground at all.
Yeah.
Pure Hegelian dialectic, but there you go. At any rate, here we are, and we've got the Patriot Act. We have to mirror the Patriot Act, thank you very much, SPP, with legislation of our own. So what do we get? We get Bill C-16. Bill C-16 took away a lot of our rights that were identical to what was in the Patriot Act, only it wasn't quite as big an act. So now we've got, in the States, we have the National Defense Authorization Act, which went through a few years ago, and that's the one where they can grab anyone off the street. No charges, no lawyers, no nothing.
No habeas corpus?
And they can put you wherever they want.
Guantanamo Bay?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Because there's no charges, there's no due process, there's no time limits, there's no lawyers, no nothing. You got no rights at all, okay?
And this is if they label you as a terrorist, for
They
example.
can label you as a dissident, not a terrorist, and do the same thing. They can do this on suspicion that because of the way you look or the way you dress or the way you talk or who you've hung out with in the last while or did you go to Libya to visit family, they can haul you off the street and disappear you, and you got nothing to say. Well, we Canadians, we looked at that and went, oh my God, look at that. And then thanks to the SPP, what do we get?
Got to do the same thing.
C-51, the one that Justin Trudeau promised to amend. Amend how? Remember how Obama got elected? Change, hope, believe. Change to what? Hope in what? Believe in what? Right? Undefined terms. Same kind of undefined terms that they get us with through things like the SPP. What we have to realize is that we have to get the big picture here, and people aren't. I have seen so many people go on and on, like the terms of the TPP have now been so-called released, and we can't be sure whether what we're seeing is actually the truth or whether it's a watered-down version for public consumption, nor will we ever know. Okay, even Shelley Ann Clark mentioned on air on this very TV show that the agreements are never shown to anyone. The first one is in the Diefenbaker bunker, 50 miles north of Ottawa.
The Diefenbaker bunker?
Yeah, I know.
Or as we call it, the Diefenbunker. Right? Because it's funny to say
It's poetic.
Baker bunker.
It's poetic, yes. But it was never, the actual agreement was never available for public viewing. So at any rate, what we're looking at is all these agreements where they are releasing certain things to us. We don't know if they're true. But what I see people doing is focusing on this detail or that detail or that detail over there. Oh, the TPP is going to hit our internet freedom. It's going to hit our electricity rates. It's going to impact smart meters. It's going to impact our water resources. It's going to impact jobs. And you've got all these different people in different groups split off to fight one thing out of the stupid trade agreement when it's the trade agreement that needs to be fought, not the details.
Right. Okay.
When you're talking about the devil being in the details, that doesn't mean that the devil is in the fine print. It means that you getting mired in the fine print is where you're going to get misled. That's where all the stuff to distract you from what you need to know is sitting. Because the devil's a liar. Well, there's no lies in there. They are telling the truth. This is what it says. This is what it does. But the mere fact that you're distracted from the loss of your sovereignty, the loss of your rights, the loss of your democracy, the loss of your ability to govern yourself, that's in the big agreement. It's not in the details. It is the backbone of all of these agreements. The very backbone. And if you look, how many trade agreements are there out there between how many nations?
And you know what gets me too is that every time we elect a new government, instead of spending time actually working on governing the country, they're running around the world, meeting with other world leaders, and they're doing all that instead of actually dealing with the situation at home.
Exactly.
And we've seen the deterioration of our economy,
Yep.
of living standards.
Oh, you ain't seen
Canada.
nothing yet. You've seen nothing yet.
Well, we haven't even got to the depopulation agenda yet, Dee.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, they're going to be cleaning up that kind of trash off the street, too, but...
Okay, so now the thing is, we've heard from people like David Rockefeller that, that somebody's got this agenda to create a one world government, and they say, oh, we'll have this.
Ain't that the pot calling a kettle black?
Well, that they'll have, they're going to have it one way or another. And it seems to me that these trade agreements and everything you're talking about is just evidence of
That's
this
the
is
infrastructure.
This
right
is how it's happening.
Yeah,
right?
This is the infrastructure. Nobody gets to vote on it. It's presented to us after the fact as a fait accompli. We have no recourse. We can't sue anybody.
I heard in my many jaunts over the internet that that's what the United Nations is supposed to represent. You
got that right.
Yeah, the whole one government type thing.
Well, that was the big.
Yeah, well, see, he's on the case.
Yeah, he's on the case. That's why we got him in.
Yeah.
In fact, that's even his last name.
Yeah, well, that's,
right?
Yeah. More silliness. Cheap seats.
Okay, Dee. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it?
Well, the first thing people need to be aware of is, look, I can appreciate your dedication to Food and Water Watch, to the environment, to whether or not we got pipelines, to whether or not we got fluoride in our water, to whether or not we have access to supplements, to whether or not we allow Roundup to be sold in this country and glyphosate to poison us all. We're all split off into all these different directions, and everybody wants support. Thing is, all of them are suffering from the same thing. And if all of them are suffering from the same thing, what should we do?
Fight the World Trade Organization.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah, where
True
are we going to
enough.
get those swords?
Don't need them.
Anonymous!
Don't need them.
Anonymous!
Hey,
swords.
those guys have done us a hell of a favor, let me tell you.
I heard they're backing. They want to get ISIS now.
Oh yeah, they are. I've seen the video.
Yeah, Anonymous is getting
they're
ISIS
They're going to hack them.
ISIS.
with
They're
the
gonna hack 'em
swords.
good.
Okay. Hey, I'm for that. Of course, we all know who ISIS is, don't we?
Osiris's younger brother, right?
No,
Something like that.
no. Osiris's sister.
Sister.
Yeah, but we're talking Egyptian, not the Islamic State, which is fake and funded, according to Vladimir Putin, by several G20 nations, not least of which is the U.S. and Britain and France.
Wait a second. Wait, Chris, did you go to that ISIS presentation the other day? So who's behind ISIS? He went to a thing. Who's really behind ISIS?
Exactly what she said.
Okay, say it again.
3 or 4 G20 nations,
Yeah.
according to Vladimir Putin, who's coming out with all this stuff.
Oh,
I thought it was mostly like a private family type schlick.
Well, yeah,
Well,
but you have to
controlled by-
remember that these private families are above,
Right.
They rule the G20, they rule it all. They're all the Manxers. And there's an old movie from like about 1937, and it's on YouTube, and it's called The House of Rothschild.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now it's a good little movie. It's fun to watch. Okay, but it gives a story of how the Rothschild banking family, there were 5 brothers, took over Europe, essentially took over Europe at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. And the way that Rothschild did it was rather interesting. He was the only one running carrier pigeons. Okay, so he got his news of what was going on at the battlefront a whole lot faster than a guy riding a horse.
the Battle of Waterloo in particular.
The Battle of Waterloo in particular, because they're all embroiled in this big, massive battle against Napoleon, who had escaped from Elba and was, I'm the emperor, and all this kind of stuff. And the last word they had in Western Europe was that the Battle of Waterloo was not going well.
But I heard like because they're using carrier pigeons, a lot of those carrier pigeons were actually shot on sight.
We're talking the Napoleonic Wars. They didn't
Okay. have
have that kind of firepower. They had blunderbusses, if they had guns
it's
at
true,
all.
It's true. I'm thinking something else.
Yeah. At any rate, Rothschild got real quick news of what was going on. Everybody in Western Europe thought Napoleon was winning. Stock market starts to crash because Napoleon's winning. Rothschild finds out, no, he's been defeated. He got crunched. But he got the carrier pigeon news first. So what did he do? He convinced himself and his 4 brothers to buy up everything that was crashing. And they owned all these stocks. They bought up everything. at rock bottom price.
You know, that reminds me. That's the other thing I wanted to say with these multinational companies, because we know the other thing in the last 40 years is that we always hear about companies getting bought up by larger and larger companies, consolidation of entire industries. So what we do have now, globally, is a concentration of ownership that's unprecedented.
Exactly.
And so you've got a ever fewer number of people
Exactly.
sitting around the boards of these very large and getting larger multinational corporations making those decisions. Well, what that also means is that all these other people that were on the boards of all these other companies, when we had way more of them, we don't have those boards anymore.
No, we
so
don't.
So we have less people, fewer people being responsible for decision making about companies all over the world, and I've seen it with my own eyes. And it takes a very few number of people, puts them at the very top of society, and everybody else is essentially a serf that has no responsibility, and that's reflected in what we see with the 1% versus the 99%.
Now, let me add another little dimension to that. One of the first acts that Brian Mulroney did as Prime Minister of this country was to disband the Foreign Investment Review Agency. Now, the Foreign Investment Review Agency was a government agency that had the final say on whether or not a corporation from elsewhere could come and set up in this country. In other words, it was a police office to make sure that corporations that weren't necessarily going to serve Canada well would not be allowed to come in, or where a big corporation was going to come in and take too much of our control in our market would not be let in unless there were agreements made whereby things were compensated for. That went bye-byes. More recently, we've seen the wheat board. My very first job as a kid, by the way, the wheat board. Gone. Well, that means that we're now under international rules for selling our own wheat, and our farmers have to bow down. Well, the other thing is, who's involved in that area? Monsanto and the biotech companies. Okay, so what's happening under these agreements is family farms are going bye-byes. Monsanto, Searle, Syngenta, Cargill, all these big multinational, big agriculture companies with all of their toxic products are taking over our food.
KD. So listen, so what are we going to do about all this stuff? The swords you suggest is not a good idea.
People need to understand these things. They need to understand it's not fight this term, fight that term. Don't allow this condition to go through on this agreement.
Right.
We have to, in order to have our sovereignty in one piece, we have to get rid of all these
Trade
agreements.
Okay.
Now,
so how do we do that?
Well, first thing we got to do is make people aware.
Right.
Because until people understand the mechanisms behind this and how truly tied up and screwed we are, it only takes one word to fix it.
No. Is that the word?
That's the word.
So people out there watching this, forward this to all your friends and get people to
do their
really
due diligence. Learn.
Well, we got it. Here's the other thing. We got the new government, right? The Trudeau government in Ottawa now. And the one thing, this is like a new Liberal government. It's not like the old boy. Well, hang on a second. I'm trying to be optimistic about this new government. I do feel better with this government in charge.
You know, you're a balloon and I got a pin.
Well, just relax for a minute, okay? Because I'll get a sword. So, so I'm thinking we just can't let the government govern. We need to get involved.
They don't anyway.
We need to get involved. We need to talk to our MPs. We need to tell them how we want them to
Okay,
vote.
let
Because
me
you
give
made a very good point
Let me give you a
before.
point they can use for that, for exactly that.
Okay.
You want to know how this happened? How did it all happen?
Magic?
Pretty much, because there's no law that says they can.
Well, how did it happen?
Well, I've been asking everybody in Parliament. I've asked my own MP. I've asked the Justice Minister. I've asked the Health Minister. I've asked the Prime Minister. I've asked everybody, what specifically is your mandate? What law, what legislation gives you the right, any government, any democratic government, what laws give you the mandated right to give away our sovereignty without our agreement? Now, I've had no answer out of any of the officials, elected or otherwise,
Of course,
that I've asked.
if they would answer, that would mean the end of their own job, so they can't answer.
Thank you. Okay? That's the whole point I'm trying to make here. Ask your MP, show me the damn mandate, or don't you dare sign that agreement, because you will be breaking our law and committing treason. Treason, and I mean treason, against all of the people of this country. Show me your right to do it. None of them could in the last 5 years that I've been asking. So I think that the more people demand to know, where's your mandate for doing this? Who gave you the right to sign these things and give away what is ours without us having oversight? Who gave you that? There is no mandate in law. There never could be a mandate in law. You know why? Imagine you're in an election campaign. There's a knock on the door. Hi, I'm Joe Blow. I'm running for the such and such party, and I'd like to be your next MP. And by the way, when I become your MP, I'm going to give away your right to make your own laws. What would the people say to that?
Did
Can you imagine anyone voting for that?
no.
Hence the secrecy. Hence the confidentiality. Got nothing to do with proprietary products or services. It only has to do with, we don't want you knowing what we're doing.
Okay, Dee. So listen, we're going to wrap this up now, but what do you want to leave people with here today?
I want to leave people with the question in their mind that needs and begs an answer. Where is their right to give away our country? And I need them also to understand, stop worrying about the little details. The devil's in there. It's going to distract you from what's real. Okay? What's real is we're signing away our democracy. We're signing away our country. We're signing away our borders. We're letting the much vaunted and much maligned protocols of Zion rule, because essentially they're taking away all the rights that are taken away in the protocols of Zion. We're going to lose it all by focusing on the leaves of the trees instead of the dynamics of the forest.
Okay.
So that's what I want people to do. Focus on the big picture. Please get the big picture. You'll understand it.
All right.
It's not difficult. Occam's razor, all the way.
Okay. All right. Okay, Dee, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me explain this stuff.
So people out there can forward this video to their friends and, of course, contact us here at that channel. We're going to have a sword making workshop every week, and then we're going to take those swords and we're going to beat them into plowshares. All right? Okay? Okay, that's it for the show. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time right here on thatchannel.com.